title Interdisciplinary Literary Studies is bestowed by today's topic Literature and History Second. Confucius once said, "Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall." Prizing the history of the achievers and glorifying their empire, I am very glad to introduce our keynote speaker and our two paper presenter. Dr. S. Annapoorni, the keynote speaker of our today's symposium, Assistant Professor and Head Department of English, Asan Memorial College of Arts and Science, Chennai. A graduate of English of Jayaraj College for Women, she did her MA at the University of Madras, where she won the Professor Sethuraman Prize for Literature. A junior research fellowship from UGC led to her doctoral research on contemporary Indian theatre, in which she capitalized on her work on stage to analyze the process of creating a performance. Dr. Annapoorni has over 10 years of teaching experience at both the graduate and the postgraduate level. A dedicated scholar, Dr. Annapoorni has edited anthologies on American literature, women's writing, and South Asian literature. Her research interests include Indian theatre, translation, and women's studies. We are very glad to have here, ma'am. And next, our paper presenters, Miss Kavya Bharathi, P. Assistant Professor of English, Dr. MGR Janaki College for Women, Chennai. And next, Miss Niveditha Jayaraj, a PhD scholar in the Department of English at Queen Mary's College, Mylapore, Chennai. Her area of research interest is queer literature with a specific focus on queer working by contemporary Indian authors. Niveditha works with NGOs that support LGBTQIA+ communities. She additionally instructed a poetry workshop on queer, எழுது, and served as a resource person for queer literature. As the Sevigal Cure Internship, she also presented papers at national and international conferences on the topic of queer literature on media. Her interests include psychology, foreign language, and literature. And today's symposium will be followed by keynote presentation and it followed by the paper presentation. So now I'm very glad to invite our keynote speaker, Dr. S. Annapoorni, to present her paper on the title, The Evolution of the Literature and History, a reading of Caryl Churchill's 7 Jewish Children. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and for the introduction. So I hope you can see the PPT and I'm also audible. Yeah.
Yes, your presentation is there and you are audible.
Thank you. So I'll begin. My presentation today is on history and literature, a reading of Caryl Churchill's play, 7 Jewish Children. Before I get into it, I just want to have this little thought on how do we look at history? Is it monolithic in terms of events that happened in the past, in terms of something that is factual, or is it mediated through memory? Memory that is both individual and collective. Why am I putting this forward? Because the play does talk about history and identity mediated through memory. So we will get into the presentation. I begin with the quote from Peter Brook's The Empty Space, which talks about a man walking across the empty space while someone watching him, and this is how he says theater, the act of theater begins. So two things are important here. One, the actor on stage, and two, the audience. Both are needed to be present at a singular space for theater to begin. That is one. The other is a quote from Caryl Churchill on the writing of her play, and she talks about how it came about as a reaction to what was happening in Gaza in 2008-9. There was an operation called Cast Lead, where the Israeli army attacked this heavily populated city of Gaza with a lot of casualties. Around 15,000 Palestinians were killed. So she says it's a way of helping the people there. She says everyone knows about Gaza, everyone is upset about it. And for her, the play is a political event, not just a theatrical event. So with these two ideas in front of us, I would like to talk a little about who Caryl Churchill is. We have students of literature need no introduction to her. She's one of those very influential contemporary British dramatists, more than 70 years old, but still very, very active. And most of her plays are very non-naturalistic in form, and they are like the play that we're going to discuss, very brief but very poetic too. Moving on to the context of the play, as I said, it was a response to a very swift, very quick response to Israel's bombing of Gaza, which was called the Operation Cast Lead, sometime in December, January 2009. So the play was performed in February itself at the Royal Court Theatre, and the script is available for free online. Anybody can download it, anybody can perform it. The only condition is that a collection has to be made for Gaza. And a very controversial play from the moment it was first staged. It has seen performances across the globe. There have been versions of it in India too, but wherever it has gone, it has raised a lot of hackles. So BBC, in fact, refused a radio version of the play because it sought to be very impartial. The first production was under Dominic Cook. He was the artistic director. He was a Jew himself, and he believed during the premiere of the play, this is what he had to say: I hope the audience will be moved by the play. I hope they will be provoked. They'll be made to think about the historical circumstances that have led us to this situation in the Middle East. Once again, putting us back into the idea that history is in the process of happening. The structure of the play is very interesting because the full title is 7 Jewish Children, a play for Gaza, and there are 7 short scenes that you see in the play. Even the 7 short scenes are kind of done in the form of very stark sentences. The sentences begin with the imperative, tell her or don't tell her, right? There is no specific setting or time for the play. The characters don't have any names, kind of making them allegorical. We'll come to that in our discussion. And each scene, the characters are different. This is what the stage direction says. Each scene, the characters are different and the children are also different. The 7 children of the title are not seen on the stage. Instead, we have adults speaking about them. The adults can be relatives, they could be parents, they could be grandparents. And what are they talking about? They're disputing how much information regarding these historical events they should share with their children. Therefore, you have the dichotomy of tell her, don't tell her. Tell her these things, don't tell her these things. And what is this trajectory of history they're talking about? The last 70 years of Israel's history. So there are many critical historical moments, beginning with the Holocaust, moving to the foundation of Israel, the creation of that land, displacement of the Palestinians, the war of 1948, the conflict that they've had over the years, ending with the 2009 operation. So as Lucy Powell describes, these are slivers of history that you get, and I have put in each section corresponds to each event in history. So you have the Holocaust. How do you know it is a Holocaust? Because Churchill herself said she would have preferred, beginning in the 19th century, Russian occupation, but the director chose to go with the Holocaust. Then you have scene 2, one of the survivors of the Holocaust talking about who were the ones who are dead, how to explain the history of those who died to the survivors. The third is when the Jews immigrate to the promised land, and how the parents talk about how to explain that this is their new home, how this land was created by displacing, by exiling the Palestinians, that follow in the next scene. Scene 5 is the War of 1948, one of those very short scenes which saw victory for the Israeli army. And here you have the voices being very triumphant, the voices moving away from fear, moving away from insecurity to a sense of happiness somewhere because of the victory. Scene 6 covers a lot of other events like the river crisis, the demolition of homes, the killing of certain children, and the building of the West Bank wall. Last section, the most controversial monologue, takes us to the present situation vis-a-vis 2009's war on Gaza, and how it was seen as self-preservation, as kind of self-defense for the Israel forces. Now, the idea, this again is one of those images of the first production. You see these characters who are in this very, very bare minimalist setting, and they come together and they discuss the ways in which you could talk about these events in history. This is one of those productions. The other is this, where you have, it's a different production, where you have, again, a group of individuals, but each representing one. They could be relatives, one could be a father trying to communicate the events of the war to the daughter. One is a reporter trying to get together information on the war to the newsroom. The other is a casual discussion between two people over dinner, talking about, like how you and I would maybe discuss the Israel-Palestine conflict, within our dining rooms. So all of these different ways in which these adults have been conceived, and how they present these events to an absent child, right? So we'll come to that. Now, is this the first play that talks about the conflict? Not really. There have been many plays that have dealt with the Israel-Palestine conflict on stage, and there are a few that I have mentioned here. The only issue is that 7 Jewish children had a lot of polarizing responses. From Michael Billington of The Guardian, who called it a poetic play, to Dominic Maxwell, who called it very empathetic, very illuminating. But then there were, the other side of the coin too, where Christopher Hart called it a ludicrous, dishonest, anti-Israeli rant, and Melanie Phillips in The Spectator, who called it anti-Semitic, and this is the word that comes back, a blood libel. And Howard Jacobson, writing for The Independent, again called it anti-Semitic, and he called it wantonly inflammatory. Churchill herself responded to the play by saying, "We should be able to disagree with our accusations of anti-Semitism, which is a pantomime of, oh yes you are, oh I'm not, to distract attention from Israel and what it has been doing." So these are some of the responses. The production itself was considered anti-Semitic. US pro-Israel peace groups, who also presented the play in Washington, actually wanted the play to be presented because it was a necessary conversation for the community to look back on who they are. Playwrights, Jews, Tony Kushner and Alicia Solomon, they said it was a terribly painful experience, but it had to be viewed because this is what theater is about. The play is dense, beautiful, indeterminate, but it is meant for understanding where we come from and where we need to go. So these were some of the very polarizing responses. There have also been others who have responded to the play by writing their own versions. 7 Other Children is a very famous example. The Eighth Child and 7 Palestinian children. These were again written by other writers who present a different version from what Caryl Churchill is presented. And very interestingly, these plays are sometimes made part of a three bill event. So Caryl Churchill's play will come on, followed by these responses to that play. So these responses are also reacting to the criticism that the play also faced. Now, as students of literature, how do we respond to the play? The reviews and responses kind of tell you that one, the play is ideologically loaded, but at the same time, it is not impartial. It is pro-Palestine is the criticism that people put forward. There is also the idea that Churchill's play is not just a swift response, it's a knee-jerk reaction, and therefore it is kind of dismissed as very unimportant. So how do you read the play? Do you read it in the context of the conflict? Do you read it as part of the divided discourse on the conflict? So what happens to the author? What happens to the text when you see it in terms of the conflict? So this is where the idea of how do you look at history, how do you look at literature comes in. So raising the question of how do you look at history, is it monolithic or is it mediated through memory? When it comes to the idea of Jewish history or the history of Israel, the overall view, the monolithic view is that they have been the victims of history. We know all about the Second World War and the genocide that happened, the Holocaust, the ultimate evil that we speak of, this history of violence that we know of. But at the same time, critics have been very clear to point out that the sufferings of the Holocaust does not negate the evil of other violences, say, for example, slavery or racism. So when it comes to the history of Palestine, their displacement, their exile cannot become secondary to Jewish history. So this is something that we need to keep in mind when we are reading the play. So each side, both the Israelites and the Palestinians, see themselves as victims, right? They are the sole victims in the conflict. But as Edward Said said, during a war, what happens? Each becomes the other. So this is what is getting dramatized in the play also. Each side has its own narrative. Each side has its own justification, their own goals, their own interests that they put forward. What Caryl Churchill does in the play is to present both sides through the absences more than the presence, right? Let me go back to this idea of the children in the play. In the context of the play, the figure of the child is very important. We begin with the idea of the 7 Jewish children of the title. Now, where are the 7 Jewish children that we see in the title? They are absent in the play. The 7 Jewish children also also kind of highlight the impact that the war will have on the most vulnerable people in society. And children are also the ones who will carry on this cultural knowledge, this heritage, this history. So the focus with which the ideologies and the identities are constructed within the play are very, very important. Though in the stage direction, Churchill says that no children appear in the play presents to us the problem for the adults. How to remember our history, how to pass on this history and identity. The focus is on the adults who need to tell this absent child what has happened to them and what is happening right now. The idea is to make this comprehensible to the child, but not too frightening. Therefore, tell her certain things but don't tell her certain other things. Because by constructing, by choosing to highlight certain events in history, you are constructing your historical narrative, you are also constructing your identity. The child's absence is very, very important because the focus is on the adults making history as they tell their story, right? So that is an important point here. How does Caryl Churchill construct this particular Israeli history for us? That is where the anti-Semitism comes in. About these events in in the Israeli history. The controversy is that the focus is on aspects in the play. For example, when she talks about this particular section, sorry, I'm going back to the survivors, the displacement of the Palestinians, and especially section, the scene 6, where they talk about the river crisis and how the Palestinian homes were demolished and the children who threw the stones at the Israeli army, how they were shot down. These aspects are all kind of glossed over. So tell her, don't tell her, in that particular section, you have the adults making the choice to present these events as self-defense, right? So the focus is on presenting to you a particular view of Jewish identity. They have always been, by setting the tone with the first two scenes, she's kind of telling us this collective memory of the victimhood of the Jewish people. They have been the victims of Holocaust. They have been the victims of history. They have always been, right from the story of Moses, they have always been the people who have been forced to move on from one place to the other. So these painful histories are meant to kind of make the audience accept that what happened to the Palestinians was also an example of how history works, right? So the Jews who always inherited this sense of violence, now when they become the aggressors, when they become the ones giving out this trauma to the Palestinians, how do we accept this? That is where the issue of anti-Semitism comes in. The blood libel, the killing of the child, that recalls this blood libel and all of that. So going back to how the Palestinians are presented in terms of their absence in the play. The focus is on telling and not telling to a particular child, to a particular Israeli child. But the focus is also on how the people who are telling the story are also absent from their home. Their home is not their home. It is a place of threat because the war is always present around them. Since security, this to present your history in a way that will be not frightening to the child, because though there is the dichotomy of tell her, don't tell her, there is always this word that follows, don't frighten the child. Okay, highlighting the idea that you are constructing a collective memory, you're constructing your history through this memory. Okay, but at the same time, the play does move to the Israeli identity as from victims to the aggressors. And this is where we come to the last particular monologue, that long monologue we have, which talks about the present conflict, the Operation Cast Lead of 2009, and you have the voice of the parent there, the voice of this very strict, speaker of the play, who is an Israeli national now, who is very proud of how the nation is standing up to their aggressors. The victims who were once, destroyed by Hitler and the Nazis now find themselves in a position of power. So the fear is now replaced by this sense of frankness. But at the same time, interesting that Caryl Churchill does not present them as inhuman. Though I call it dehumanization here, I would like to revise that idea, because what she does is to present to you the seesawing of their identity. So you have the speaker kind of being very frank, but at the same time also, not to be misread, the words themselves are the response of somebody who has been affected by this violence. They are numbed by the violence, they have become defiant to the violence around them. So they see this tragic violence as very necessary. The self-defense, self-preservation is what leads to what people have called this dehumanization of the Jews, right? The dehumanization of Palestinians have always been there, but the dehumanization of Jews is a way in which certain people have read the play. But my response to that is this dehumanization becomes a way of self-preservation for the speaker, for the Jewish identity. So it is the rhetoric of war. This is what we're talking about. This is the rhetoric of war. It is also how war is presented in terms of opposition. There is always a winner, somebody who loses, right? This is how war has always been presented to us. But war, for a third person objective observer, war is dehumanizing to both parties, right? War does reduce both of them into victims, and that is what I think, and I personally believe, Caryl Churchill is also working towards. She wants us to understand that through invoking the history of the Israelites from the Holocaust to the present, what she does is to show us the cost of the war on these people, right? What has it done to them? It has turned into something that they were earlier, victims themselves. So who does the play address? That becomes a very important question. The child, the missing child, is the first audience. They are the ones who are listening to, who will listen to what the parents have to say. But the audience are also important for the play. The audience are the spectators who are aware of the politics in this conflict and how it is presented in the media also. The media that is so-called unbiased does take a stance. The children don't know anything, or they know only what is told to them. But the audience, the objective audience, know the whole truth, so they become a part of what is not spoken, what is not presented. We, as the reader or the audience, are participants as well as spectators. And this is what Caryl Churchill does. She makes us a part of, a witness to what is happening on the stage, right? So it is like we would go back home, we would talk about the play, we would discuss the issues, and we would engage with what is happening on both the sides, right? So this is the focus of the play. The repetition of tell her, don't tell her, brings to focus on the politics of telling, and therefore creating a narrative. So the focus is on how much is told, to whom, what is being told, and when this is being presented. The modes of telling are relevant to the representation of the conflict. So tell her, don't tell her is also the way in which the media covers this crisis in the conflict, right? So the absence of Palestinian voices. This again is a criticism that Caryl Churchill faced the absence of Palestinian voices because people. So what happens to the voice of the Palestinians? This is something that this omission is something that a lot of critics have highlighted. But again, the way she uses the word they throughout the play, when she uses the word they, there is a changing constant to that word. The meaning of the word they constantly changes. In scene 1, the they are the Nazis and what they do to the victims. In scene 2, the they refers to the victims of the Holocaust, not the perpetrators, but the victims. Later, the they are the Palestinians who are not present like the child, but who are there in history. The fact that there is a movement in the meaning of the word they is for us, the audience, to understand how meaning, how lives are also contextualized. How do you perceive these lives? How do you perceive identity? Through the context of this discourse. So it is not that we hear only Israeli voices. The focus on the Palestinians is through their highlighted. It is like the children who are absent, the Palestinians are also absent, but the audience is aware that they are needed during the play. So the focus is on telling of the events, explaining of what is happening, and the play kind of gives us multiple, very conflicting responses at the same time. It demonstrates to us how structures work, right? Structures move from fear, apprehension, understanding, acknowledging all that has happened, and then moving on to making sense of our identity. So that is the movement that we see in the play. So the play explores a set of relationships: parent, child, present parent, absent child, a particular event and its explanation, a particular set of historical events and their meanings, discourses, and the discourses relating to their history and identity, and our understanding of that discourse, performers and audience, the relationship between them also. So, are these relationships easy? No, they are problematic, but there is always a potential for engaging with history, engaging with real people, engaging with events, and engaging with understanding also. So this is where I end my reading of the play, and we can have our discussions now.
Thank you, Dr. Annapoorni, for that very, very, say, well read play that you just gave us. It was a new play for us. I think
Yes.
nobody else would have read it except you right now. And through the play, you also gave us how we look at history. I just wanted one more.
Yes.
I mean, that was very clear. Audience, you said.
Yes.
Audience.
Yes.
They are able to see many things so dispassionate.
Yes.
But the audience also has an identity.
True, ma'am.
Yes. So, for example, what stance did India take towards, and how did we keep quiet on certain things, and how did we voice for certain people? So that way, the spectators, the audience, also have their national identities also to consider.
Yes, ma'am.
That is the only thing because the BBC refused to.
Yes. See, actually, if we go back to history, the whole problem was part of the colonial legacy that British left,
Yes.
right? Like what they did between India and Pakistan. This is part of that colonial legacy, the creation of Israel and the whole issue of what the conflict with Palestine is thanks to them. And then take a step back and say, no, no, we need to be impartial. Where was that when you were, doing all the wrong?
Yes. Of
So
course, that is history again.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So,
Does anybody else have any observations to make, or uh, can we move on to the
yes.
papers? Yes.
Thank you,
Okay.
ma'am.
Then.
And now our request, Ms. Kavya Bharathi is Assistant Professor of English, Dr. MGR Janaki College for Women, to present her paper. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Uh, Good evening, everyone. Hope my screen is visible.
Yes, your screen is visible. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thank
Right.
you. Okay. So, good evening, one and all present here. Um, Sorry, my screen is. Uh, okay. Good evening, one and all present here. My topic for today is the evolution of heroine. Okay. Heroine, woman fiction across time. Women in fiction across time. So, when we widely see it throughout the history, we can. These are the categories the whole of literature can be widely put down into. So first, if you take the ancient mythology, take any religious text or anything, there the portrayal of women will be a mother, a mother of a god, a demigod, or someone who's a war heroine, or like Athena from Greek mythology. Like these are the characters that we saw in ancient mythology. And then when we come to the medieval time, there we see the everyone often they are so virtuous, they're chaste, and these are the times where the women characters were typically written by men and not women. And when we move on to the Renaissance is something where we have a shift in the narrative where there were portrayal of women which was stronger than the previous era, such as we had Shakespeare, we had his plays where the main character or the protagonist, the hero, saved by a heroine, like how Portia does in Merchant of Venice. So these are the kind of characters that happened in the Renaissance, which is like before and after this, and in the Victorian era. So when you come to the Victorian era, all the evolution of man, it reached a peak in Victorian era, like how even to sit on a horse or how to have a cup of tea, everything would have something called as an Victorian way, and that was portrayed in the literature of Victorian era on the novels, where how a woman should be, how finding a man is the ultimate goal of a woman, and these were the portrayals that we saw in the Victorian era. And now we come to the 20th century, after the wars and the revolutions, the industrial revolution, everything, we tend to see a different version of or different situations that the women face, and how they are going on into it. And these are the themes that have been reflected in the novels here. And now modern and contemporary literature, there we see more of layers to female characters, where we tend to have reasons for why such a character have behaved in such a way in such a situation. So these are the layers that we see in today's literature. Okay, so when we widely talk about female characters in whole, the situations that they face are something that makes them different from one another. The type of women, stereotypical types of a rebel, um, a mother, a loving mother, a warrior princess, a very timid woman, or a villainous woman, or a cruel woman. These are all the types that has been present throughout literature across time, but the situations that they face have been different in each era. And one thing that varied from century to century or from time to time is that what can be said and what not to be. So, this is the constraint that every author had in their own era of portraying female characters. They are saying the same thing, but in the situations that they are in are different in accordance with the time period they are in. So, from there, what are the things that can be said and that are not to be said? So here I took a comparison of two novels, Jane Eyre and White Sargasso Sea. So Jane Eyre is a novel from 19th century by Charlotte Bronte, and the White Sargasso Sea is from the 20th century by Jean Rice. So the connection between these two novels is the White Sargasso Sea is a attempted prequel of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. So when we look Jane Eyre, so this particular novel, a classic English novel, is written in the year 1847, which is the 19th century, and that is the starting of industrial revolution. And women um, were in a high time peak of expression. When I say expression, we had Jane Austen before, so the women writers are slowly budding. And the reason I took these two novels is that these two novels are written by women and they are in the perspective of women as well. So as long as the female narratives are written by women, it makes it reliable. Nor when women characters written by men, because they are not going to feel exactly how women are feeling and how it can be transported into words and literature. So this particular novel, published in 1847, has a narrative, okay, first person narrative of Jane Eyre. So Jane Eyre is a troubled little child who was being mentally and physically abused by her aunt. Okay, we know the whole story, how she goes on to find her home in Rochester's place, and how Rochester uh, is a who's a who's not so a good man, but in this particular Jane Eyre novel, he is being portrayed as a hero there, and how she falls for Rochester, how not for the appearance, but how he talks, how lovely he is, and then goes on to find there is a Bertha Mason in the attic. And there, when we come to White Sargasso Sea, almost a century after, or more than a century after Jane Eyre was published, we have White Sargasso Sea by Jean Rice. And this particular White Sargasso Sea, it goes on to tell us the story of the Bertha Mason in the attic. Liberty of not explaining Jane Eyre much and going on to White Sargasso Sea, just jumping in. So, White Sargasso Sea is a feminist point of view, and how Bertha Mason, whose original name was Antoinette Cosway, and there we went on to see her narrative of how she meets Rochester, how Rochester is not the hero but the villain in Antoinette's life, and how he renamed her into Bertha Mason, and why she was kept in the attic. And there we see colonialism and post colonialism of how the history is being depicted in the White Sargasso Sea. But when we look into White Sargasso Sea, we go to the Caribbean islands. When we go to the Caribbean islands, there in the Caribbean islands, which is colonized by British people, and this particular Causeway family, Antoinette Causeway and Annette Causeway, her mother, they are from the French colony of the Caribbean islands. And just because they are from the French colony, they are being kept away from the English colony people and English colony servants also. And when there is abolishment of slavery, the narrative goes on to even explain the abolishment of slavery also there. And when the slaves are given a chance, okay, when they're given a chance to treat their masters, okay, or they treat the previous masters as equals, they tend to go and attack them, and that is the trauma, or that is the effect that Annette has. And Antoinette Cosway's mother, she loses herself. She goes mad when her house is burnt and her horse is killed, and also her son is killed. So these actions of after the Abolishment Act, just because this particular family is from the French colony of the Caribbean islands. These English colony people, they attack them, and this particular burning of the house and killing of horse and killing of a brother is deeply imprinted on Antoinette Cosway. And when she gets married, and when she goes on to have a life in England, she doesn't see her to be belonging there. She doesn't belong in Caribbean as she's a white woman. And when Rochester says, "See, I don't see a difference between you and the servant. You're all from the Caribbean islands." There comes a scene where Rochester goes on to cheat Antoinette Cosway with her servant in the Caribbean island, and there he says, "I don't see a difference between you and your servant. You're all Caribbean people, and that's how I see you." So there, her own identity comes into a question. There is a generation called the generation because of colonization. When colonization happened, the colonizers, they came in, but when they left, they didn't leave completely. So the generation that were kept dispersed, kept here and there in the colonies, they are known as the um, lost generation. And the lost generation of these English colonies, they don't have a fixed identity. I belong to this particular country, I belong to this particular soil, and this is where I belong. This belongingness is missing, and this is also portrayed in by Antoinette Cosway. And when she goes back to England, she is already having a hard time with Rochester, and she is renamed to be Bertha Mason. And from the moment she is in the Thornfield Hall, the Thornfield Hall is the place where Rochester lives. And when she enters the Thornfield Hall, she is being kept in the attic because she is being addressed as a woman with uh, 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 a woman with mental disorders, or she can't be stable. And this is also a place where we can see the female narrative taking place. Okay, the female narrative is nothing but we follow the female characters. When we follow the story from the point of view of a female, this is also altered a lot from Jane Eyre to Jane Eyre to White Sargasso Sea. When we went on to see Jane Eyre's story, we had a one perspective narrative. We saw her, we saw her problems, we saw her suffering, and we saw how Rochester was the hero of her dreams, but not the perfect man. But she finds he has his own flaws, but Rochester is the ultimate hero in Jane Eyre's eyes, and that's how it was in the previous century. In 19th century, a woman to be married to a wealthy man is something that they want. That is something that they sought to be a height of their social status. But now in 1969, when this particular White Sargasso Sea was written, the female narrative takes a different turn, where the where we see Antoinette Cosway taking how her trauma, how her generational trauma of her mother burning the house, or her mother being burnt with the house, and how she is surviving with the wounds, her brother is being killed, all these, how in this female narrative we see that how this goes on to take us and tell us what is the multi-dimensional ideologies of a female character can be when this particular situations happen. So when we put together colonization, and how the trauma, the generational trauma that she has been put through, there we come to see in the end of the novel, we see Antoinette Cosway or Bertha Mason coming out with a candle, and this candle is connected to the very scene where she comes. She burns the house. She burns the house in Jane Eyre also when they're about to be married. Jane Eyre and Rochester, when they're about to be married, she comes in and she burns the Thornfield Park. And this particular thing is a prequel. This White Sargasso Sea is a prequel to Jane Eyre, and this place where she goes onto the first time of burning the house, because this is her traumatic way trauma, that and this is her coping mechanism. The female narrative tells us that if at all something bad happens to me, if at all I'm not able to tolerate something, I will burn the house. This is the generational trauma that she's faced because of colonization and abolishment of slavery back in Caribbean Islands. So this is again going back. And when we if at all we further see the text like the empire writes back, we saw it in post-colonial literature, right? How we have texts like the empire writes back, Edward Said's Orientalism, and other the concept of other. Okay, these are for the so the eastern people, but when we see, women were also put under some kind of pressure by the colonists, by the history also. And when women write, it is very much same as how a a colonized person writes, because that's how we have been in literature, been portrayed by men for so many years. And when women came, we were not given a space to write or express fully. And only in the previous century and now, we were able to explore the dimensions of a female character. We are able to explore the dimensions of one female single character in one particular novel, how there are multiple narrative, multiple phases that a particular character can have, and justification that has been given, because women are always portrayed flat or portrayed as a straight character and not a round character mostly. And when a woman comes in to write about a woman, we can see the characters being round. And now if we see, now we had a very very long history of how the women is being portrayed in literature. And now if we see, we have authors like Colleen Hoover, who's a very popular American author, and one of her novels, Verity, speaks how a woman can have multiple narratives and how can she live in literature, live inside her books. The story of Verity follows like she wants to be a villain. Okay, she wants to write a anti-hero character or an anti-heroine character, and she does these exercises by uh, uh, she she achieves to write a very gruesome, very appealing villain character by writing her own life, okay, her own tragic life in and blaming herself to be the reason for the tragedies. She does these as exercises, but when she finds out, when her husband finds out that she's been writing all her own life incidents as she is the villain, he thinks that it is true. It is true that this person was actually a villain and not, and she's not doing it just for the novels, and he kills her. This is how the story goes, and this particular novel is such a multi-dimensional novel, and there are so many layers to it. So slowly slowly the portrayal of women have been always not the same, but the types of thing were same. The types of women that we have in history, and also in portrayal of women. We have Portia who just fought for her love, and how she managed to defend her love. And kind of the same thing happens in real life, happens in Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc is a French woman who put herself to be a warrior. And we have outcasts, we have rebellious women, we have drama queens, we have soft nature women. So all these are there. But when women starts writing about women, we can see more and more of layers to it. And I think that if at all there is more women coming up and more men coming up to tell their stories, there is a collaborative writing. Whenever there is a character, whenever there is a novel, there are both genders. Okay, the both genders, and the character should be. Uh, that's how the novel is made, or a story is made. story is made. So when we there can be collaborations like a male writer and a female writer coming in together to write a novel, and that's how the story can be relatable, and that's how we can make justice to what the characters can actually feel. So that's what my presentation. Thank you.
Just any observations on that paper or yes, anybody? Students? In that case, can we come back to the paper after going through the next one? Next paper, please. Yashika?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation, ma'am. And now I request Ms. Niveditha Jayaraj, PhD research scholar, to present her paper.
Good evening, one and all. So, the topic that I am going to work on today is Queer Asia. I'll just share my window. So, I hope.
Niveditha, can we see you? I know, I think we are only watching you as a picture. We haven't
Yeah.
seen.
Oh, you haven't seen me?
Yes,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
haven't shown yourself.
Yeah, just give me a minute.
Okay, fine.
I'm a bit sick today, so I'll turn off my cameras and go back to the uh,
Whom
session.
are you working with?
I'm working with Dr. G. Sadhana,
Okay.
Queen Mary's College.
Yes. Just go ahead, please.
Yeah. I hope my screen. Um, Snow.
Yes, yes, it is visible.
Yeah. So, Queer Asia, the history of queer population in Asian literatures. So, we'll just go through some of the literatures from a few countries in Asia, because Asia is a huge continent and I cannot cover everything within the time limit or inside a paper. So, I'll pick out some important factors that I want to talk about in comparison to uh, Asian literature and the queer community. So LGBTQI plus community in Asia is always a taboo topic, and as queer community is considered to be one of the minority communities also, and there is always a stigma that follows them, and there are tons of social barriers and prejudices over queer people. And the first thing that people, when we talk about queer community or queer people, that comes up is that it is always compared to their sexuality and sexual orientation rather than um, treating them as human beings. That is one thing that I've noticed. And there is this one stigma that uh, any person that comes under a queer community only thinks about sex. So LGBTQIA, which includes the Aroas community, should also be considered, I think, personally. And when we come to Asia, the division of people is by religion, ethnicity, and cultural identities. So when we have Hinduism, we have Buddhism, we have Zen, we have Islam, and many other religious identities, and these also reflect the queer people's lives. Their cultural identities and ethnicities are also part of it. So, in my paper, I wanted to discuss the pre-modern references of queer personalities and culture from the um, extracts, literatures, art, theater, whatsoever is available, and a few religious and mythological narratives. And we'll discuss about the deep-rooted queer culture and literature that has existed before the colonial period, and how it is going to impact the current literature. So I want to talk first about India, our own country, where we have tons of queer representations, queer identities throughout the epics and mythologies. But are they visible? Doubtful, very doubtful, because it is always queer subtext. And even the ones that are clearly queer and out and loud, they are also brushed aside, probably because we have a very strict traditional norms that we believe that this is a Western concept. But yes, here we are breaking through that. So from stories from Mahabharata, Bhagavata Purana, Saiva Agmas, and then Valmiki Ramayana, and then Mahabharatas, we have different versions. So each version you have a different story too. So Aravan people, uh, Aravan worshipping people, you can see that it is culturally rooted in South India. So people who worship that god. And then Bangashwana is one of the characters who's both male as well as a female. So a transgender character once again. And when you take uh, Lord Vishnu as Mohini, we are seeing yet another queer representation. I believe that even if you call it cross-dressing, or if transforming into a woman, it is still considered to be a transgender representation. And so does Ardhanari. So half man, half woman. Yes. There are different, so many other representations too. So read Devdutt Patnaik's books talking about queer mythologies, or Ruth Vanita's works, you can see that there are deep-rooted cultural references throughout, and um, these references can be traced back to our history, our mythology, our epics too. So not just the ones that I mentioned, but if you take the relationship between Babar and Lord Ayyappa, there is a queer undertone which is always missed out. So you might ask me, why do you have to read everything in a queer subtext? Probably for the visibility of these queer characters. Okay. And in India, we are not just Hindus, okay? So we have Christians, we have Muslims, we have other religions. So uh, another important factor is that the Persian Urdu traditions in India. So with the Muslim reigns coming in India, we have the power dynamics of these Muslim kings who always wanted to be on top of everything. So if you take the um, characters like Jahangir, or Babar, or Tughlaq, or Khiljis, they they all have these ideologies, and most of these kings, they had queer relationships throughout, be it in their courts or with their courtesians. They have this culture of having concubines, male concubines. So yeah, one of the most famous works is about Sultan Muhammad and his lover Ayaz, and there are poetries, beautiful poetries written about their relationships, which is brushed aside. Now we don't find these poems, but these are Persian poems written for them. And Rekti poetry is also about the Persian poems in India. So you have different poets writing about their male lovers, which is hidden very well, because those days they cannot be very explicit about it, telling that they are reading it for their lovers in the court. So they just try to hide it as a female version or something like that. So this is a bit a condensed form of the Indian queer community and the existence in the past. And now after colonization, we do have a bit of debate, or we do have a bit of confusion about these queer communities. Are they from the past, or are they from the western part? But I believe that these stories will give you an idea of how they've always been with us throughout. So when we talk about other countries in Asia, Japan is one of the developed countries, as we call in Asia, and there is a bit of confusion once again. Like, are Japanese accepting of queer culture or not right now? Yes, once again, there is a bit of restraint, there is a bit of confusion. There are queer communities that have existed for, but none of them are very open about it. So during the Edo period, which is around 1600s to 1800s, the literature and art, the samurais, the priests, the kabuki theaters, and they had these same-sex relationship between men, especially their patrons, and these relationships, they are called as non-shuka or shudo. Shudo is more like mentor, steward, platonic friendship. Non-shuka is the more erotic way, or the homosexual, romantic, and sexual relationship. And this non-shuka is dated way back in the Sengoku era, which is before the Edo period. And it lasted till the Meiji era. Meiji era is around the late 1800s. And one of the reasons why it ended during the Meiji era is also the colonial influence. So during the times of trade and everything, there is a question, and that caused the question from the foreign or the colonizers. There was a question of this kind of a relationship, because it was not accepted then by them, and that led to a stop of this non-shoku relationships and everything. So one of the most famous non-shoku relationship explaining literature piece is by Ihara Saikaka. It's called Nanshoku Okagami. It's a collection of short stories, and these short stories describe their relationships and how they have these deep and rooted friendships and romantic and sexual relationships with their fellow beings. So one thing we have to know is that during this era, even Buddhism was their majority religion, and it was accepted, tolerated, not accepted, it was tolerated by them. They had no questions or anything about it. You can have your base unless it doesn't cause a problem. Or one of of the most important things to see is that these square relationships only questioned when it was unethical in a way. I mean, if the child was way too young to have a relationship. See, these non-shocker relationships talk about patrons and younger male, I mean, teens or just newly uh, um, uh, s- 18 plus, just who have crossed those age. And um, these relationships were questioned when the age of the one of the lovers is not too ethical or younger. So that was what they had a problem with. Other than that, these relationships are very common in the Edo period. So that is when these works were also very popular. And yes, there were no proper terms for the woman's same-sex relationship, but women also had the courtesians and the concubines. They had these relationships within them, same-sex relationships. And Japan also has gender shifting deities. So Daikokten or Daikokyon, uh, Kokunyo. So this is a um, he or she, they take a role depending upon their form that they want, and they are worshipped by the priests and the Buddhist monks over there. And they're also the lord of fertility too. When we come to China, Churchill, the rabbit god, is represented as the deity and regarded as a patron of same-sex love and relationship. So rabbits are a symbolism of same-sex relationship in China even today. So if you take their literatures, even today you can see that relevance. And during Han Dynasty, the popular term the cut sleeve came out, and this was when Emperor Ai he fell in love with one of his concubines called Dongxian. Yes, as I said, even in Japanese and Chinese cultures, they did have this relationship with concubines, even in India too. So it was something very common within the kings. They used to have male concubines, and it was very common. And yeah, Emperor Ai's favorite concubine is Dongxian, and one day Dongxian fell asleep on his sleeves, and the emperor cut off his sleeves not to disturb Dongxian. And from then on, the term cut sleeve became a reference to homosexual relationships in China. And there is also one other reference about the peaches too. So bitten peaches, it's called bitten peaches, and that was also from this same. I think that is from Tang Dynasty. I'm not very sure, but yes, they too had such relationships,
I'm so
and
sorry,
it
but
was.
your PPT is stuck on the first page.
Yes, that's what I was about to say.
Oh, is it now? Is it clear now?
Yeah, now it is moved, and you can maybe move
Okay.
it to the reading mode.
Okay, you want me to move to the reading mode? Yeah, is it clear now? Am I in China?
You're in Japan.
Oh, I'm in Japan. Oh, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in China now. Okay. Okay, so yes, as I was talking before, in Tang Dynasty also they had this bitten peach story where one of the emperors got a bitten peach from his male lover, and that is when this history started. And yes, that even today, these the cut sleeve culture or the bitten peach culture is still prevalent and is highly romanticized in many texts because of the small effort effort that these people put into their relationship, especially in a time where it was frowned upon or it was not very common. So, and later, I think in China's Confucian time is when they had a ban over these same-sex relationships, and uh, there is a stop to the Chinese homoerotic relationships or homosexual relationships. And even in Qing dynasty, there were fictions and short stories based on these cut sleeves and uh, their references with them. So yes, now in present China, we have a lot of literature works written, but it's a very conservative country right now, and we can't see much from them. Even their on-screen relationships or off-screen relationships, none of them are revealed nowadays because of the highly traditional Confucian ways. I believe someday we'll see them too. Have I moved to Thailand? Uh,
Not
No,
Not
still
yet.
in China.
Okay. I believe there is a problem.
Yeah, we're in Thailand now. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
nice.
So uh, nowadays, Thailand is very famous for their boys' love series, and one of the reasons is that because Thailand is very open about promoting these people, fanships and everything. And when you take their literatures, they have a very extensive uh, course of queer books, queer novels, queer writings dedicated in Thailand. And that is one of the reasons why Thailand is very popular. But when we go to their history, the Ayutthaya period, um, they had temple murals where these relationships were described, the homosexual relationships were described in detail, both for men and women. And these there are people called kratoi. These people are the third genders, the transgenders, not only just in Thailand but also in Cambodia and Laos too. So they had this specific term given for transgender people. They are called kratois. And kratois are not just transgender people, they can be intersex people, also effeminate men who want to become women, or just effeminate men too. So, yes. And Sunton Pu, he is one of the most famous Thai poets, and um, his poetry, um, they had relationships, same-sex relationships, in some of his poetry, which was clearly not very direct, but yes, there were hints about it. And he is called the Shakespeare of Thailand. So yes, maybe it's an indirect reference, but who knows. But yes, Sunton Pu's poems were very popular. Two of his poems, Pra Apai Mani and Pra Sutton Manrot, both of them had clear definitions of same-sex relationships in the poems. And since they were a Buddhist majority, as I said before, Buddhism was tolerant of the queer relationships, and hence they had um, they had not had much problems then. But then Prince Krisen, King Rama one's son, was there, and he had so many homosexual relationships within his theater men's, within his little friend groups, and and that was one of the reasons to which they had a problem. They were not very accepting of it, and that caused a lot of problems in between Thailand. And then started the uh, the I wouldn't say ban, but they were not very accepting of queer relationships after that. So during the 1950s and all, it was very difficult for people in Thailand to even survive. Excuse me. It was very difficult for people in Thailand to survive because they had this conflict in between. They were not very accepting, and all these problems occurred. And later on, in the late 90s, they had a breakthrough, and their literature started flourishing, and people were started to become more accepting. And now Thailand is the first country in Asia to legalize same-sex marriage too, which came out very recently. I think on March 27th, they have just announced it. So yes, from a long way we have come in all these countries. So we'll just brush through some other details too. So we have a lot of cultural differences. When you take the Muslim ideologies, there's always a question: were they accepting? Did they accept it? But then, if you read Ludovic Mohammed Zahil's Homosexuality, Trans Identity, and Islam, you'll see that the past Muslim reigns were very Islamic religion, and the people were very accepting. Even in Arabic literature, during the Ottoman periods, there were a lot of queer contexts, queer works written, but they were all just brushed away, as said before, due to colonial drain and everything. And before homosexuality in the Arab Islamic world, 1500s to 1800s, by Khalid Raiheb, you can understand that these texts and these works that were written during the Ottoman periods were all very accepting and very encompassing of queer people. And they didn't have a problem until the colonial men and their idea of sodomy came in, and yet again it started problems. So as I said before, the non-conforming Buddhist beliefs were one of the reasons why Japan, China, even current Thailand, Taiwan too, Cambodia, Laos, all of these places are accepting of queer relationships. And if you take Laos now is, I think it's Indonesia's Christian majority. So there is a bit of a conflict in acceptance. When you take South Korea, Korea in general, the Hwarang, the idea of Hwarang and Hwarang boys, the flower of youth, they had an extensive relationship between the. It's a military art literature place where it's kind of like a university, but not a direct thing for it. But yes, they used to practice sword fighting, something similar to the Nanshoku, but maybe like the Shodo thing. So Hwarang was also like that, and these boys used to have same-sex relationship between them. And King Sukchom, during his reign, there was this writer called Pak Chomji, and he used to write a number of plays based on the homosexual themes. And his one-act drama, Myung Ga Yop, and that was one of the very famous works. And this reference of Hong Man-jong also had this references that talked about people who are people who have homosexual relationships. So, but in current South Korea, or if you take their beliefs now, they are not very welcoming of queer relationships nowadays. So yes, religion has a very high impact on these cultures and these people, and that it again um, is a reason why queer people are not very much accepted. I believe, at least from the I think from the third slide to this slide, seventh slide, I've talked about a lot of same-sex relationships, mostly about men. But the question arises here: where are the women? Women visibility in literature was very low compared to the ancient times to now. And since Asia is a patriarchal controlled society, they had this idea that women and same-sex relationships are to be brushed aside, and women are doubly marginalized in that way, because men have at least the freedom of being men, and women, they can't be women, one, and two, if they're lesbians, then their identity is hidden under the bushes. So yes, as I said before, colonial influence also had a great role to play in these relationships. And if you take all the works written by women or by queer women or by men about women, we have to do a decanonization of the canons to understand all those. So as I mentioned before, Rekti poetry also had um, this division called Doganas and Janakis, which talked about same-sex women relationships. And Thailand's pre-modern uh, Samatkato Kamchan, which describes same lesbian relationships, lesbian and both same-sex relationships also. This particular text was written in 1995, which talked about the pre-modern Thailand, and in that there was a extract about this particular lesbian relationship in the court, where women were punished with 50 whips if they had uh, a sexual relationship with another concubine. So all of these were hints of existence of queer relationships even before. And uh, it is said that Tamura Toshiko's work, lesbian work, Resignation, is considered to be one of the earliest lesbian uh, novels in Asia, which came out in 1911. It could also be one of the first works of queer relationships in Asia too. I mean, modern queer relationship. So that is uh, one thing. So I've reached the conclusion. Um, we have talked. I've talked about the existence of queer cultures from the ancient and medieval times. We have seen that queer has always existed. It was there in the past. It was there in the medieval. It is there now, and people can accept it. There need not be a confusion about that. And with this, we are criticizing traditional norms and assumptions about any culture, be it Islam or be it Christianity or be it Hinduism or Buddhism, anything. We are trying to break these norms and assumptions about these cultures. And there is a thing about power dynamics, as I said before. Whomsoever is in the power can get away easily, and that privilege existed only with the patrons, the ones that suffered mostly in these relationships were their lovers, because patrons can get away with whatever it is, but the others generally have to suffer with it. And especially women, as I said before, they were doubly marginalized in this area. As queer people, that is one of the most hardest things that women have to go, I think. And this also questions the heteronormative belief that heteronormative is the only normal. So this also shows that queer is normal. Queer has been in this nature for a long time. I remember this quote they used to say, heterosexual heterosexuality is there in over a lot of species, but only homophobia. Sorry, homosexuality is been in over 100 plus species, but only homophobia exists in humans, and I think that is correct. So we also seen in different contexts how queer relationships have been there, and I think this can help and sensitize people to accept uh, queer people into the public. And this also proves that queer is an Asian concept rather than a westernized concept. Thank you so much for bearing with me. I'm so sorry I have problems with the slides, but I apologize for that.
Yeah, that was a very comprehensive history. I think first time I'm hearing all of the west of whole of Asia as and the keynote speaker, if she has any comments on the rest of the papers, can do it now. Annapoorni, Dr. Annapoorni.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, I actually mentioned in the message that it was very comprehensive.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think Kavya Bharati's paper was something that we are aware of, the connection between white Sargasusi and Jane Eyre. And I like the way how she took it forward in terms of how women writing about women, women writing on women, and how it's part of this history of women's writing. So that was my take on what she had to say.
Yes, responses from the rest of those before we close. Is there anybody else who wants to say something on any of the papers? Now, good luck to all of you who are working on these particular areas, and I hope you go ahead with it. Can we have Nancy, or is it who else? Who's Yashika?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay. Then I will propose the out of thanks.
I think so. Ask if any response from any of you research scholars who are listening in. No.
Oh.
In
Can you
that
share I propose the out of thanks, ma'am?
case, yeah, you can. Yes, and you can also tell us when the next
Yes,
program
ma'am.
is. Yes.
Yeah, sure. As we come to the end of this session, I deem it an honor to propose the vote of thanks. I thank our keynote speaker, Dr. S. Annapoorni, Assistant Professor of English and Head of the Department, Asan Memorial College, Chennai, for sharing their valuable insight on literature and history. I thank our college principal for her constant support. Our heartfelt thanks to Dr. Maria Priti Srinivasan, Associate Professor and Head, Department of English, for providing this research forum for the scholars. I would like to thank our paper presenters, Ms. Kavya Bharathi and Ms. Niveditha Jayaraj, for sharing their ideas on literature and history too. Once again, I thank all the staff members and research scholars who are present at this forum. Thank you all, and we will meet again on 10th May 2024 with the literature and anthropology too. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. By Annapurni, and nice having met Kavya and Niveditha. Good night.